Welcome back to the second of Radio Days 3 broadcasts, and we're going to continue the theme of co-productions, making vox pops with professional organisations, and discussing autism with the professionals. I have another broadcasting from the Restraint Reduction Conference, and I'm going to let it just sit and play with you, and you decide on it. The Autistic Radio Conference Tour 2025 is a co-production with Build, the Restraint Reduction Network, and Autistic Association. We are open to co-productions with professional organisations where our ethics and interests coincide and align. This short series of short podcasts demonstrate cooperations that are possible, recordings with people at the conference, speaking openly, clearly, with equity in the communication. Hello again at Autistic Radio. We are continuing at the Build conference, the conference where we're trying to reduce the use of restraint on various people who, for good reason, need interventions from practitioners in the state. I have with me today somebody rather special. You may have heard of Callum's Law. Please introduce yourself, Callum's mummy.
Hi everyone, my name's Beth. He's a young man now. He's 27 and he has autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, quite profound learning disabilities. When Callum was 11 years old, he was in a special school. Didn't have a lot of language, didn't have a lot of understanding of instructions. One day he was riding a specially adapted disabled bicycle in an empty school gym hall. But apparently Callum wasn't following the teacher's instructions. So the teacher decided to pull Callum off the bike and he got a fright and he kicked her. And that resulted in 4 staff taking Callum face down onto the floor. He was 11, but he wore clothes for a 6-year-old. He was a very tiny little boy. He had quite a lot of developmental delays, so physically he was really tiny. And they took him face down on the floor with such force for a total of 40 minutes until he couldn't breathe any longer and he lost consciousness. He urinated through his clothes onto the floor, and then the staff picked him up. He was quite floppy, so they strapped him down in a wooden chair, a bit like a Heathfield chair that's used for children that have got mobility issues and can't sit. They strapped him down in that and they stood over him with an egg timer to show him visually that he was being punished. They didn't let me know what happened. They simply got him dressed in clothes that weren't his own, and they put his own clothes that were urine soaked in a plastic bag, sent him home on the school bus. And when he came home to me, his lips were blue and he collapsed in my arms and he said, "I dizzy, mummy, teacher hurt." And that was the start of a journey that I never ever thought that I would be on as a mum. I became very vocal because how could they do that? I didn't even know that they could do that to a child in school. This was a special school. I thought they were specially trained in understanding children like Callum. I thought that Callum would get the extra love and care, and he didn't. So I started to look for what was the guidance on using this in schools, and I found that in Scotland we had no guidance. If we didn't have guidance, then we really had to have it. So I spoke to other parents and realised I wasn't alone in this, and other parents would tell me, "Beth, that happened to my child." I did a petition back in 2014 to the Scottish Government, and in 2015 I gave evidence in the Scottish Parliament around what had happened and what I was hearing was happening all over the country to other children like Callum. And that started a 10-year campaign approaching a member of the Scottish Parliament, Daniel Johnson, MSP, and I asked if there was any chance that we could take up a members' bill, because all the guidance that we'd got around the use of restraint and seclusion in schools, it wasn't statutory. And I felt it wasn't working, because if it wasn't statutory, nobody had to do it. There was no mandatory ask to record and report these incidents that were happening. And over the last decade, I'd had over 3,000 families in Scotland alone that sought me out and said, this has happened to my child. I started to keep records, I started to keep data. And what I then found was that it was all happening to children that were neurodiverse, had learning disabilities, had very little language, very little means of communication. Those children, they use behaviour to communicate because it's all they have. So the distressed behaviour, which was brought out of unmet needs because the environment wasn't right, the person supporting didn't know how to respond, there was no training, staff felt as though, they were completely powerless, they didn't know what to do. And an idea formulated in my mind that what we needed was statutory guidance to protect these children in law. We needed mandatory recording and reporting of incidents, because a lot of the parents were telling me, I didn't even know that this was happening in schools, as I hadn't. And I hadn't been told either. And the other thing that I wanted was training and support and resources for staff. So that's why I'm here today. I'm a trustee of the Restraint Reduction Network. The support that I've had from the RRN has been absolutely phenomenal. And I think without organisations like this that are shining a light on what is really barbaric practice, I'm sorry, I don't have another word for it. We need to shine a light on this. We need to raise awareness that this is happening. My research is telling me that it's small children, they're all neurodiverse, aged between 2 years old, 2 years old, and up to about 8, 9. Now, I'm not saying it's not happening after that, but the problem is mainly primary school, and it's mainly in the early years. The children I support are the most vulnerable. They have no language or very little language. They are already dealing with really awful issues, sensory processing problems. They can't handle the bright lights and the noise of the classroom. And because they're distressed, because they're communicating, I can't cope in this environment. They've been subjected to things like restraint. And the other thing we've got is forced isolation, where they're put into rooms, isolation rooms. They're locked in, they can't get out, and it's all hidden. I call it a dirty little secret because that's how it feels. Callum didn't even really understand at the age of 10, 11 what school was. He had so little understanding. He was functioning at the level of a toddler. And we don't expect toddlers and infants and babies to go to school and sit there nicely, look at the teacher, feet flat on the floor, and comply. Why was Callum expected to do that? He had no means of communication. He couldn't say, I need help. So the only way that he had was through his behaviour. And that incident 15 years ago now, I wasn't in the room. I couldn't possibly know what happened. All I was told is that Callum refused to follow the teacher's instructions. Callum refused to follow a certain route around the empty gym hall. I wonder why he was pulled off the bike just for that, for non-compliance. If I had been pulled off a bike physically by somebody bigger than me, would I react? I absolutely would. Would they take me to the floor and restrain me by force? I don't think so. Why are we doing it to a child? I've never called for a ban on the use of restraint. I do believe that there are times where we may have to use restraint, physical force, to keep a child safe from harming themselves, safe from harming other people. I believe that, if a child's running into the road in front of a car, yes, please make sure you hold them back. If they're going to jump into deep water, yes, please hold them back. If they're at serious risk of harming themselves or serious risk of harming others, yes, please hold them back. But what I'm seeing is the use of restraint and seclusion in schools on small vulnerable children because of behaviour that is linked to their disability. I think it's being used as a form of physical punishment, and that's wrong. So Daniel Johnson MSP has a members' bill in the Scottish Parliament. It's at stage 2 at the moment, which means it's at the amendment stage. We are confident that Callum's Law will pass. And what we're asking for is statutory guidance for staff, mandatory reporting and recording of incidents, and mandatory training, resources and support for staff. We're not saying that anything has to be banned. We still have a duty of care, but we need to be very clear in what we're doing behind those closed doors in schools, because our children can't tell. They can't go home to their mummies and daddies and say, this happened to me at school today. And often parents like me had no idea that this was going on until the child came home with bruises and injuries that were unexplained. That's got to stop. We have to be very clear of what we're doing, how we're treating our most vulnerable children. There has to be a duty of candour to communicate with parents, and if something has happened, parents have a right to know what that was and how do we remedy that going forward. So that's why I'm here today. If anybody would like any more information about Callum's Law, my email address is callumsmummy@yahoo.com, or you'll find me on social media under Beth Morrison. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Beth. You have put everything so clearly. You've done your thing. You've done your thing beautifully. I know you're listening. I've met you in the Scottish Parliament, and I know a number of MSPs occasionally listen to Autistic Radio. Please listen to the testimony of Beth and support the bill. Thank from everybody here at Autistic Association and Autistic Radio. Thank you to you, Beth.
Thank you.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
We speak.
Our words,
Our words,
we listen.
we listen.
We speak.
Our words,
we
we
listen.
listen.
We speak.
Our words,
We
we
listen.
listen.
Beth has become a very, very powerful advocate. Her simple words from a mum. I'm really proud that Autistic Radio manages to facilitate recordings with people like Beth, and I've just looked up the engagement figures for that particular episode, and unlike many others, people listen to the whole thing and then they listen again and they repeat parts of it. So it was worth Beth having a word with Autistic Radio at that conference. I'm going to play another Vox Pop from the same conference, so bear with me while I just cue it up.
The Autistic Radio Conference Tour 2025, recordings with people at the conference. There's going to be something that Edwin here has to say that we all need to listen to. Hello, Edwin. Would you mind just introducing yourself and telling me why you're here?
Hello, I'm Edwin Jones. I have been working in this field for a large number of years, and I have previously worked with Build and RRN. I've retired, but I've returned just because the work's so important. It's something I need to do.
It's a passion in your life, sir.
And I've come back because I realise how important and the work is to me and how important the whole topic is.
Wow. So this isn't an obligation for you. This is a desire to put things right.
Yeah, this is something I feel very strongly about. We need to work for social justice, and this for me is a very clear human rights issue.
Human rights is how you frame this.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, there's a whole political movement
Mm-hmm.
against human rights.
Mm-hmm.
So it triggers people. The word human rights triggers people, and the people who are voting get triggered by that. Is there a better way of framing that so that we don't allow them to jump on that?
Well, I believe human rights are for everybody all the time. So I wonder what it is that triggers that. And I think we should stand up and be clear. All our rights can be jeopardized at times. And if we don't support the human rights of everybody, then we're all at risk. I reject the narrative that the human rights legislation is somehow problematic. That's a political move. And I think that we all need to stand up for human rights historically. If you're rich and powerful, then you exercise your right. If you're poor and vulnerable, that's when the issue really kicks in.
So what you're saying, that human rights are a given for a certain group of the population, they don't come across their restriction. So they don't see the need for laws to enshrine human rights.
Mm-hmm.
Would it perhaps be useful to change the wording and change human rights to personal freedom? That seems to be something that people are keen to have expressed.
Yes, we could, but personal freedom is a human right. We do need to think about language. I'm not against using other terms. I think my issue personally is I think there's nothing wrong with the term human rights. But if we think about individual rights, freedom from torture, the right to a private life, the right to family, they're all key. So you could talk about each one individually, but sometimes it's helpful to have a collective note.
Here on Autistic Radio, we've had a whole series of discussions and conversations with people from the behaviourist community, behavioural scientists, ABA practitioners, PBS practitioners. They mention human rights again and again. They mention neurodiversity and again. I believe that there's a prejudice in people like me who advocate for better understanding of neurodivergent people that it's all a bit of talk. How do we change that now?
Yes, I think it's easy for people to talk about human rights. The harder thing is to help people have their human rights in practice. So for me, if somebody is detained in an institution, their human rights remain. The human rights haven't gone away, but we need to liberate them from institutions in order for them to really enjoy the full benefits of the human rights. I agree, there's a lot of talk about human rights, but I think at the RRN, what we're concerned about is actually implementing them in practice. That poses difficulties for, need a better word, service providers. That causes some dilemmas, and there's always a kind of some sort of balancing act that has to happen. But that's important because that to me says we are implementing them. We haven't just got some lovely glossy poster on the wall that talks about human rights. When I look at what happens in some of the institutional environments, I mean, it's very clear that they're not promoting human rights. It's more than posturing. It's more than the feeling that you should say this. So I'm going to say promoting human rights can be difficult.
Thank you. I'm going to then comment to you, and I'm going to say that here, as an autistic man, attending workshops, attending the main speakers here, I believe that this organisation has gone beyond talk, and I believe that what I witness as practical solutions that are being shared amongst professionals, incredibly valuable to my community. And I hope that there will be more people out there listening to Autistic Radio who engage with the right professional, and that will help us all to turn down the narrative of protest and turn up the cooperation. Thank you for joining us here on Autistic Radio. Thank you for putting your words out there on Autistic Radio.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's great.
How'd you feel?
Okay, good, yeah.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
We speak. Our words, we listen.
We speak. Our words,
We listen.
we listen.
We speak.
Our
Our words,
we
we listen.
It's time to take a break from this and join my fellow conspirators, my team of disparate, weird, circus type, outlandish people in the 444. And here on Radio Days in day 3 we have a 444 drop-in every day. If you are feeling that this time of year has gaps in it, then we have a place for you. If you're autistic, don't be alone. You can drop in to our backstage area at any time during our broadcasts in the 4 days between Christmas and New Year. Go to autisticradio.com/backstage. There'll always be somebody there to talk to. See you in the 444.